This is the second video in our deeply interesting data series, DIDS. And what we're going to be talking about today is the happy, super intriguing reliability. How do we know that the data about people that we're collecting, performance rating data, 360 data, employee survey data, personality data, whatever it is, how do we know that our people data is reliable? Which, as you remember, means how do we know that the measuring stick that we have, the measuring tool we have, is actually measuring what we say it's measuring? If I want to measure strategic thinking in Kevin, can I actually measure strategic thinking in Kevin? If I want to measure performance in Kevin, can I actually measure it? If I want to measure how much he was paid, can I actually measure it? Well, it turns out there are only 3 ways to measure things. You may not have known that, but there's only 3 ways to measure things. Before I show you, just think about what they might be. Okay, you can count things. Like you can count how much money I put in your bank account. You can count how many inches you are tall. You can count how much you weigh. Count. You can rate. How good do I think you are? How tall do I think you are? And you can rank. Rank as in, Kevin seems to be taller than Michelle, seems to be taller than Meredith. I can rank how high they are. So those are the only 3 ways you can measure things. Count them, rate them, rank them. Probably the least useful way for the purposes of people data is ranking, because although I probably can rank the different heights of Kevin and Michelle and Meredith, it makes it very difficult though for me to compare one group of rankings in one team to another group of rankings in another team, because although Michelle is the second tallest person on my team, she's actually small compared to everybody else's height on other teams. So ranking is tricky with people data because it means you can't do much interpersonal comparison. The best, most reliable kind of measuring is counting. Like, how much money did we pay Kevin last month? That is a beautiful measurement. Why? Because it has something called, don't be scared of this, it's called Interrater reliability. Reliability, Interrater reliability, which means that if Michelle counts how much money went into Kevin's bank account last month, and Meredith counts how much money went into Kevin's bank account, doesn't matter which one of them is counting it, the number is exactly the same. It was only $3.50 in Kevin's bank account. But it doesn't matter whether Meredith did the counting or Michelle did the counting, the number is the same. That's the beautiful thing about counting. It has what's called inter-rater reliability. Doesn't matter who's doing the counting, it's the same number. So when you bump into people data that is countable, it's always good data. Payroll data is great data. Time and attendance data is great data because it doesn't matter who's doing the counting of the number of days that Kevin missed, whether it's Meredith or Michelle, it's the same number. Your address is good data. Your length of service is good data. The last time you were promoted is good data because all of that is countable. There are a number of things we can count them. It doesn't matter who does the counting, it's the same number. Okay? So that's countable data. Anytime you bump into it, it's good data. But what about those things that we can't count? Many people are not in sales, so we can't count the number of widgets you sold. Many of us are not in manufacturing, so we can't actually count the number of widgets you made. What happens if you're a nurse? What do I count if I wanted to rate your performance as a nurse? What happens if you're a software engineer? What would I count? What happens if you were a people manager? What would I count? Well, it turns out you actually can't count a lot of what people create in the world today. So when it comes to measuring things about you that I think are super important, that aren't countable, what do? If I wanted to measure the success of a nurse, but I can't count anything, what do I actually do to measure it? If I wanted to measure the success of a leader, but I can't actually count something in his or her world, what do I measure? Well, that's where we get to this. We get to rating. If I can't count it, I then have got to rate it. That's where we get performance ratings. That's where we get personality ratings. That's where we get employee opinion survey ratings. We are rating. So I'm going to spend a minute on rating. Most of the data that isn't countable people data is ratings data of one kind or another. And most of it, frankly, is bad. What do we mean by bad? Well, initially what we're saying here, we mean it's unreliable. It's not measuring what we say it's measuring. Let me give you an example. Most ratings data suffers from what's called rater unreliability. There's two different kinds of rater unreliability. The first kind is what's called the idiosyncratic rater effect, which means when I rate Kevin, let's say I'm his manager, and I'm asked to rate him on potential. We've all done that, right? We're a manager, we have to rate Kevin on potential. It turns out that my rating of Kevin on potential, let's say it's a scale of 1 to 5, my rating of Kevin on potential seems to reflect much more about me as a rater than him as a person who possesses a thing called potential. When I rate him on strategic thinking, it turns out that my variation of rating, 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1, reflects much more me than him. How do we know this? Because when I rate Kevin on strategic thinking or potential or growth orientation or whatever it is, or leadership, there's a pattern to my ratings. When I then take my measuring stick and apply that to my shell, the measurements should move because I'm looking at a different human being. Turns out that they don't move. My pattern of ratings moves with me as I look at different person after different person. In fact, 61 to 62% of the variation in my rating of Kevin or Michelle reflects me, not them. That means that your performance rating, if you're an employee, the performance rating you get from your manager reflects your manager, not you, which is a problem because we act on the data as though it reflects you. We pay you, train you, promote you, develop you, fire you, as though your manager's rating of you reflects you, and it doesn't. It reflects him or her. That's a big problem. It's a very well-known effect, the idiosyncratic rater effect. It means the rater is idiosyncratic. They have unconscious rater bias, and I don't mean bias for gender, race, sex, age. I mean the natural way in which they use a rating scale is idiosyncratic, and we can see it in the math. And as you rate other people, it just moves with you, which means most rating systems are not windows, they're mirrors. You're just bouncing yourself back at you. Think about that. Now, many people will then say, well, that doesn't matter. If I'm idiosyncratic when I'm rating Kevin on a bunch of questions in a 360 survey, let's say, or maybe a performance rating, that doesn't matter. We'll have lots of other people rate Kevin, and then Marcus's idiosyncrasy will be averaged out. I mean, you've probably heard that. Oh, don't worry, Marcus is idiosyncratic. Add 3 more idiosyncratic people rating Kevin, and it'll be fine. No. If I am a source of bad data because of my idiosyncrasy, and then you add 6 more people who are also a source of bad data, you add lots of bad sources of data together and average it out, it doesn't reveal Kevin. It doesn't turn it into good data on Kevin. It's just lots of bad data. Almost all 360-degree surveys are bad data. I'll say that again. Almost all 360-degree surveys that ask me to rate Kevin on a bunch of stuff, it's all bad data, which means it doesn't reveal Kevin. Adding more people to it doesn't reveal Kevin all the more. Almost all 360 surveys are bad data. Almost all performance ratings are bad data. Almost all potential ratings are bad data, by which I mean, right, it does not reliably reveal what we say it reveals. So that's the idiosyncratic rater effect. The other one is what's called data insufficiency, which simply means when I'm rating Kevin on, I don't know, strategic thinking, I don't have enough data to rate him. I haven't been around him enough to see what is or isn't strategic thinking. I don't have enough data. You're asking me to rate Kevin on something as subtle and as fluid and as hard to define as strategic thinking when I bump into him like 3 times a month. How do I have enough data to rate? It's like asking the Swedish judge who's rating the ice skater to rate the triple loop when you didn't even watch it. Or you popped in at the last moment, saw the end of it and walked out. Now rate her on the triple loop. It's ludicrous. So most of our ratings data is bad data because it's asking me to rate Kevin on potential or performance or some competency after another competency after another competency. And first of all, I'm an idiosyncratic rater of Kevin. And second of all, I don't have enough data on Kevin to even be able to rate him in the first place. That means all 360's bad, all performance ratings bad, most employee surveys bad. So how do we solve for that? How do we actually get reliable ratings? Here's the thing that we should all remember. A rater is a reliable rater only of his or her own experiences and intentions. If you ask me to rate Kevin on strategic thinking, I am a bad rater of that. If you ask me, do I feel as though Kevin cares about me? I'm a reliable rater of that. I know if I feel that or not. If you ask me, do I know what is expected of me? That is something I am a reliable rater of. If you ask me to rate Kevin on strategic thinking, bad. If you ask me to rate clarity of my own expectations, good. So whenever you see a rating system that asks you to rate someone else on some quality or competency or trait, it's bad data. It's always bad data. It reveals the rater, not the ratee. When you see a survey tool that asks you to rate your own experience or your own intentions, that's good data because it's reliable. You are a reliable rater of your own experiences and intentions. Anytime you're asking to do anything beyond that, you are producing bad data. So look at any tool, look at any system, look at any process, and ask yourself, if it's asking me to rate my own experience, good data.